Two leaders of Islamist groups are proposing an end to the deadly protests in Egypt. They say they'll stop rioting if the military stops its crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood and its allies. Supporters began protesting after the Brotherhood-linked former President Mohamed Morsi was overthrown by the military. More than 1,000 people have died as a result. This new proposal to end the violence comes after much of the Muslim Brotherhood's leadership has been arrested.
For more on the events unfolding across the Arab world, we're joined now by our Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell. Chris is currently in Cairo. Now, Chris, before we get to the situation in Egypt, let's go back to Syria. It looks as though the West really is going to take some military action against Syria. The question is, what will bombing a few airfields or chemical weapon plants do?
It's a good question, Mark. What will be easy to do is get in militarily, and by using cruise missiles and hitting those targets you mentioned. What's going to be harder is getting out of the situation. There'll probably be pressure on the West to increase their military intervention against the Assad regime. And the other big question that's going to be asked, and especially in Israel, if they tip the balance of power on the Assad against the Assad regime, on the rebels, many of these rebels are Islamists that are fierce opponents of not only the West, the U.S., but especially Israel.
Well, what is Israel's response likely to be if the U.S. and its allies attack?
Well, one thing they're doing right now is many Israelis are getting gas masks just in case that the conflict is going to spread across the border. One of the big questions that Israel is asking right now is what's going to happen to many of the chemical weapons that Syria has. There are reports, many of them credible, that many of these chemical weapons have been transferred to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah has about 60,000 rockets, and there's a great concern in Israel that these chemical weapons could one day be on their way to Israel. So in the future, it is possible that there might be a preemptive strike by Israel against some of these chemical weapons about Hezbollah. What happens after that, whether Hezbollah will retaliate, is unclear, but there is the possibility of a wider regional conflict when all these military actions take place.
Chris, you're in Egypt right now. Talk about the situation there. Do you think the Muslim Brotherhood will end their protests peacefully?
I don't think that's going to happen, Mark. And one thing that we've been doing is just yesterday we were down in a Egyptian town called Minya, and many of the churches, Christian businesses, orphanages actually, and one of the ministries down there have been attacked by the Muslim Brotherhood and pro-Morsi supporters. And it's, some of the worst violence against the Christian church in Egypt in almost 700 years. And yet, despite that, Mark, we found that many of the Christians there are resilient. They are saying they're going to continue their ministry even more than before. They're putting their faith in Jesus Christ. And we'll hopefully have that story to you tomorrow on Newswatch and the 700 Club. And it's quite inspiring to see how they're reacting to the persecution they're facing on a daily basis.
Boy, it sure is. Yes, we look forward to that. Chris, thanks so much for you and your insights, and stay safe. And for more of Chris's coverage of the Middle East, make sure you check out his blog and show, Jerusalem Dateline. You can find links to both on our website, cbnnews.com.